Everyone has nightmares. But for actors, they can take a very different form because their worst nightmares happen when they are wide awake.
And then I slid off the edge of the platform and ended in the lap of one of the patrons in the front row.
He takes the chicken costume head off. It makes his toupee stand straight up on his head.
And I feel something crawl into my ear canal and go inside.
Jesus went up into the rafters where he arrived with a crash.
What I've been saying in Vietnamese translates to my hurts when I don't look at you.
I'm Luann Moldovan, host of The Actor's Nightmare. Join us each week for real horror stories from the stage, told by the actors who actually lived through them. Sometimes terrifying, sometimes hard to believe, often very funny. And every actor who has been around long enough has at least one nightmare story from the stage that made them think, it's time to get a real job. Hi, I'm Luann Moldovan, and welcome to The Actor's Nightmare. We have a great story today, but before we get into it, I want to thank our sponsors who have been so supportive of the show. First, a big shout out to Artists Repertory Theater, Portland's premier regional theater company, producing intimate, provocative shows that provide a home for a diverse community of artists where they can thrive and take risks. Check out their 2019-2020 season at www.artistrep.org. Also, thanks so much to our patrons, Bob Conklin, and to Len and Susan Magazine and their company Real Estats, providing statistical overviews for residential real estate in Oregon and Washington. Check them out at www.realestats.net. And of course, we are so grateful for the studio at North Rim, where we record our podcast. If you want to do a show, check them out at studioatnorthrim.com. Today, we're trying something a little different and something we hope to do a lot more of. First, I want to say hello, Adam Klugman, who is the producer of the Actor's Nightmare podcast and is usually in the studio observing very vigorously and carefully, but he's on mic with me.
Hello, Luann. How are you?
Good, Adam. Thanks for joining me. We're doing this different thing, which is, I'm going to let Adam explain it.
Okay, so usually we like to have people come into the studio to record. But we had an opportunity to get some veteran theater actors down in Los Angeles who wanted to do the show, who loved the concept for the show, wanted to be on the show. And so I have a friend down there, my dear friend, Paul Friedman, and I asked him for a favor, and he went out and he recorded like 3 different actors. They were all in the room together listening to each other's stories.
And they're all friends, which they wanted to be together and hear each other's stories.
Right. So we think of this as the Actor's Nightmare road trip. We go to L.A., we've recorded some people, so there is an interaction. There's no interaction with you. There's sometimes you'll hear laughing in the background. That's just their friends laughing at the stories. And one of the actors is Dan Lauria, who's famous for The Wonder Years.
Right.
But
played the father.
Played the father in The Wonder Years. But what a lot of people don't know is that Dan is committed to the theater, particularly new works. He really feels that the lifeblood of the theater is new works, and not just new spectacle musicals, but new dramatic plays. And he's really, really committed to that. And
I knew of Dan the whole time I lived in L.A. He was like this theater hero. You know, he had a theater venue on in Santa Monica Boulevard, which was kind of Theater Row. And he was very, very looked up to. It was like, what's Dan Lauria up to now? You know, like you're saying, new works, new plays.
And new screenplays. He used to do readings of screenplays, but he was his dream was to resurrect Playhouse 90.
Which I love those.
I don't think people know anymore. I mean, I guess only if you're in the theater.
Requiem for a Heavyweight. And, I mean, that was live. Those were live. Talk about theater nightmares. In fact, didn't your father do one of those?
He did a couple of them. One he did, it's one of my favorite things my father ever played, and it was called The Velvet Alley. That was written by Rod Serling.
Wait, what was it called?
It's called The Velvet Alley. There's only, you can find it on the YouTube. The video quality is just horrible. I mean, but it's the only copy that survived. This was Dan's dream, to bring these kinds of things back. And what I think, what some people don't really, I think people in the theater understand, but not everyone understands, is that when television came along, there was no model for it. They didn't know what it could be. So what did they do? They did theater and Catskills.
Right.
So you got Sid Caesar's Show of Shows, and you got Playhouse 90, right? So it was either, slapstick, really broad, comedy imported from the Catskills, or it was, trying to emulate Broadway. And that's what the Playhouse 90s were doing. They were essentially emulating theater, but putting it on TV. They were live performances, multi-camera, live performances that were staged and rehearsed like plays, and they would just shoot them.
They were such
And they're
elevated versions of that kind of entertainment, of a play transformed to television, knowing it was live, knowing it was going out to millions of viewers.
Right.
Oh, I remember the ones I saw so well. Like,
Did you ever see Marty?
Oh,
with
yeah.
Rod Steiger.
oh, right.
So Rod Steiger did the original Marty. Later it was Ernest Borgnine in the film, but Rod Steiger did it as a Playhouse 90. It's fantastic. I mean, it's just, I like Rod Steiger so much better as Marty. Oh my God.
So Dan Lauria and Shuler Hensley, who's a great Tony Award-winning, fantastic actor.
Right.
He won a Tony. One of the ones he won was for Oklahoma with Hugh Jackman. He was also in Waiting for Godot with Sir Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart on Broadway.
Wow.
So he and Dan and the great Patty McCormack, the iconic
I don't know if
Rhoda
anybody
from The
remembers.
Bad Seed, if anybody ever saw The Bad Seed, which was a play first. She did it on Broadway.
She did it on
right?
Broadway. Then she
did the movie.
which didn't really happen very often. Usually,
No.
but where were they going to find an 8-year-old who could pull that off?
Who could play a little sociopath so
Yeah.
well.
Oh yeah. If you have not seen The Bad Seed,
Oh, gosh.
you absolutely must. So Patty McCormack.
Yes.
So we're going to kind of lump these all together. We're going to
Yeah.
put them all together in one podcast. We're going to start with Dan. And one of the things about Dan is, so Dan was my father's best friend during the last 20 years of his life. I think Dan talks about how they came to do this, but so it's my father and Dan in the very treacherous territory of the Florida blue hair dinner theater type crowd,
And
right?
wasn't it the same theater that was in the movie Soap Dish?
Right, it's that. It's basically that. It's
that
basically those people.
Yeah.
And what's funny about it, what you're going to see is that, they don't care that they're in the middle of the performance. They'll just get up and say what's on their mind.
Right.
And so Dan talks a lot about that. So this is a really good one from Dan Lauria. Thank you, Dan. Mike, let's just roll it.
I'm Dan Lauria. Most of the audience would know me from the Wonder Years, and I've done over 50 plays, but the ones they might know is Lombardi on Broadway, and I actually was in a musical, Christmas Story, the musical, and I cannot sing a note. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a play with 50 people, half of which are kids, and you look around and you realize you're the least talented person here. That was me. So I am going to tell you stories about Jack Klugman, because who's the father of our producer, and the two actors that meant most to me in my life were Charles Durning and Jack Klugman. Matter of fact, my greatest memories are going to dinner with Charlie and Jack and Peter Falk and Dom DeLuise, and just stories would go on. But the last line of my bio is, Dan doesn't do plays by old dead white guys. I only do new plays. And I did a third watch with Jack. That's where I met him. I played his son. We had a great scene together. And next day he says, I know you do a lot of theater. Charlie Durning told me about you. You got to come do The Price with me at the Coconut Grove. And I said, I ain't doing that old play. It's too long, and I don't want to put people to sleep, especially old people. And he says, come on. So I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do The Price if you do 2 new plays. And he agreed, and he did. And the play I did with him, The Value of Names, he always said that was the best play he ever did. It was about the House Un-American Activities Committee. And Jack was very much involved with that. And John Garfield was one of his best friends at that time. Anyway, we go to the Coconut Grove in Miami. I don't know if anybody ever worked there, but that thing in Soap Dish, that scene where Kevin Kline is working in Miami, that's true. The youngest person there was 104. And they do 5 matinees, and all these people want to get out to go to the Blue Plate special. Now, in the very first scene, Jack, who's playing Solomon, the old antique dealer, he has this monologue to me. It's not short. It's beautiful. Jack, he was the best Solomon I ever saw. But it was about his daughter dying 60 years ago, because he's supposed to be in his 90s. Well, at the end of the play, we're now in the last scene. Jack's character Solomon comes out of the bedroom, and he has the same monologue. It's basically the same thing. But now it's almost 4:30, and all these old people want to get the bus to get to the Blue Plate Special. So Jack's halfway through the monologue, and some lady jumps up and goes, "Jack, it's 4:30. So as we're bowing, Jack goes, "She could have at least called me Solomon." And then one day, I swear this is true. It's getting near 4:30. It's a matinee. It's light outside. The theater is dark, naturally. And this very heavy-set woman gets up with a walker and is going to the side door and opens it. It's a fire door, so it's a big slam thing. And the walker doesn't fit through. And she bangs it. Boom, boom. And the audience starts yelling, "Sylvia, Sylvia, sit down." And she yells back, "Don't worry, I'll hold the bus. Enjoy, enjoy." And it went on for like 5 minutes. She couldn't get the walker out. And I turned upstage. I said, "You wanted to come to Florida." But the worst one, they're all deaf. So during the play, all you hear is, the hearing aids go off, right? But on the first night, there was a group that asked for the front row. And I said to Jack, "They can't be more deaf. Why do they need?" He goes, "No, they hang the oxygen tanks on the stage." I said, "You got to be kidding me. They hang their oxygen?" He says, "Yeah." Now, I don't know if you've ever, for people who haven't been on stage, we learn to throw our voice to the back. But I never had to throw my voice over the first row going, So, and then they fall asleep.
Oh, yeah.
So you hear, if they paid that much money for a good nap, God bless them. The worst thing is you hear, because one person, usually the wife goes, "What did he say?" And then you hear your own lines coming back. He goes, "He said," and then eventually, "What did he say?" You hear, "I don't know." He goes, "Oh, were you sleeping too?" And some guy was real loud. I guess his wife gave him the elbow, and he went, and the tracheotomy tube went out on the stage. So now he's dying. He's, so I go over and I kick the tube off, but it went between two wheelchairs, and the guy couldn't get it. And he's literally dying. I don't know whether to go, because I have a monologue there, I'm talking about Brooklyn. And I'm doing the Jackie Gleason. I hope the guy, I was about ready to say, "Is there a doctor now?" And finally, you get the tube back in, and you hear, "Ah." And thank God, I got the flop, so it's now, 5 minutes later. I'm praying, don't hit him. So that's what Jack dragged me into. But the best one for me, and this is just this one show, and you could ask Judd Hirsch. Shuler and I play golf with Judd Hirsch. Judd was there doing the play Art. I'm rehearsing with Jack doing the Price. And at the opening of the Price, the cop comes out and looks around the stage, and then the wife walks in. Well, Bob Calvin, the director, great director, he has me walking around for like 3 minutes looking at the furniture. And, after a couple of days of rehearsal, I say, "Hey, Bob, can we cut this in half? I mean, I'm just looking at it." He goes, "Oh, you never worked Miami before. You're going to need it." And I look over at Jack Klugman and goes, "You're going to need every second of it." And then Bob went to tell me why, and Jack said, "Don't tell him. Don't tell him." So that night we go out to dinner with Judd. We're going to go see his show. Actually, it was after the show. And I said, "Hey, Judd, they got me walking around for 3 minutes out there." He goes, "Only 3 minutes?" He said, "You're going to need more than that." And now I'm like, "Oh, come on, what are you guys doing?" I figured they're pulling some kind of joke on me, right? So, and this happened every show. Opening night, there's Jack in the wing, and he doesn't come on for a while. And what are you doing? He goes, I want to watch this. And it happened every night. I'd walk on stage, and you hear, who's he? He's that guy in the show with the kid. Oh, the kid with the Down syndrome? No, the other show. You know, the one where the devil talks to him. And they would, it's in the program that I'm in the Wonder Years. And they argued about what show I was in. And Judd said they were always mixing me up with Cheers. They would talk about Cheers, and he said, I was Taxi. He said, one night I went, Taxi! He yelled and they would argue over it. And so the first night I go behind this big dresser, I look in the wing, and there's Jack nodding at me. See? Told you. So that was just that one play. But working with Jack was just great.
Hello, my name is Shuler Hensley. I'm mainly a theater actor, Tony Award-winning theater actor. I just want to throw that in. And Nightmares, I think I was born into theater. I think what Mistakes do and Nightmares do in theater is that it instantly breaks that fourth wall, and you have a connection with your audience that you would never have if you were able to stay in the story. One of the ones I remember, I was doing Phantom in Phantom of the Opera, Das Phantom der Oper. I became the Phantom for just about a year, and there's so many things on these sets that can go wrong, especially that when you're relying on mechanical movement of sets, of people being where they're supposed to be, and there's a lot of illusions in Phantom. And I'll never forget, I love this too. I'm playing the Phantom, and I'm coming down these ballroom steps in the scene where he reveals himself in the ball, Masquerade it's called, or Maskenball in German. And you have a trap door at the bottom of the steps. You have this big explosion of smoke, and the trap door, and you sink in, it looks like you disappeared, and then at the top of the stairs, you reappear, but it's your double, right? Well, my double got hurt at the top of the show, and his replacement happened to be about maybe 4 feet tall. So I'm 6'3", and I'm like, ha ha! Poof, trap door, and then at the top of the stairs, this mini me is coming down the stairs, and it's like, and it was like the most surreal, wonderful moment, and the cast was laughing. I guess the audience didn't, but it was just the strangest, most wonderful. And that was an utter nightmare because it was a serious moment in the show, but no one could stop laughing. So it looked, later the audience thought people were so emotionally involved in it that they were crying, but they didn't realize they were crying with laughter. So I moved from that to London, where I got the role of Judd Fry in Oklahoma at the National Theater. And this was sort of my big break. And the guy playing Curly, my nemesis in the show, was a guy who no one heard of from Australia named Hugh Jackman. It was Hugh's first big break besides Australia, because he was known as a musical theater kid. And he did a few movies there, but really this was a big thing for him. So this was a mechanical show as well, and my favorite memory of this was there's a big confrontation scene between Curly and Judd in the smokehouse. The smokehouse revolves around, and then the audience is treated to being in the middle, inside the smokehouse. Well, this one show, the revolve broke down, so the smokehouse was facing off stage, so you couldn't see inside. So what happened is Hugh comes walking out expecting to go in, and he sees that the smokehouse is not going to turn, and so we just improvise, and he invites me outside. He's like, Judd, you want to come outside for a minute? Which is fine. It started off well, but you have to realize that the scene is really about him seeing things in the smokehouse, like the hook. Oh, there's a rope there, Judd. I bet you could hang yourself. I bet you could hang the rope. all that stuff is no longer available. So he just replaces the lines with, "I bet you got a hook in there, Judd.
No.
I bet you got a rope in there, Judd." And as he's doing this, I see, because Hugh never seems to lose his cool, but he was just sweating profusely about how are we going to sing the duet. But luckily, the smokehouse during our scene is just slowly turning. So we're doing this, and it finally writes itself right before the song.
Oh.
And he had run out of things to say because he was just sort of sitting there. And I said, "Why don't we go back into the smokehouse and you can tell me what you wanted to tell me?" And so we continue. But that whole moment of not knowing how you're going to get out of something, there's a big audience there. Adding to it, it's a musical, so you know there's a song coming up that you can't escape. It's the best. It's the absolute best.
My name is Patty McCormack, and I sound like Brenda Vaccaro this morning. Just wanted to give her a little shout out because it's pollen season, and I'm in Los Angeles. That's what Shuler told me. So
She is in Los Angeles.
Anyway, I've worked a really long time. If I tell you how long, it'll be kind of sad because it means I'm really old. I started really 70 years ago, and I started as a kid model, and then I slowly worked my way into walk-ons on television, and then I did other things, and my first real successful part that I got was when I was 6, and it was my first play. It was called Touchstone. It was with Ossie Davis and other people. It was about blacks and whites and afterlife. So it lasted 1 week on Broadway, and no one came to see it.
What year was that?
We opened,
What years was that?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, it had to be. It was before Bad Seed, so I'm going to say, if I was 6, and I was born in 1945.
51.
Figure it out. Okay. Thank you. And so anyway, that was my baptism into the big time, and I learned a lot during that production. I'm just going to ramble, and you can take what you want. And I wound up doing very naughty things on stage because I had no clue. You know, I was 6, and but obviously not shy. I always thought I was shy, but clearly I couldn't have been, because there was a scene where Josh White Jr. was the young kid in it, and he was carrying me downstairs, and I started to talk to him. I was supposed to be dying or dead, one or the other, and limp, you know, like that. And instead I was talking to him all the way down the stairs saying, "Don't drop me, don't," you know, stuff like that, and having a wonderful time. And after that performance, the producers came backstage and took me down, and it was like being in boot camp. And my mother stood by, didn't know what to do, you know, didn't know whether to say, "Don't talk to her that way," or whatever. She was not a showbiz mom, really. So, but I learned a lesson that you don't mess around. And so that's just one little memory that's really early on that I never talk about. But the one that's kind of funny is later on, when I was more used to the work, and so I did The Bad Seed. I was playing a killer, actually, in The Bad Seed on Broadway, and they took 6 of us, and we all made the film, and it was a big, wonderful thing. Anyway, my story about The Bad Seed is that I was also doing a TV show. Some of my memories were really mixed with what's so-called the golden age of television. And we didn't know that then, But later on, we found out we were in the golden age of television, but it didn't look golden at the time. So I wound up trying to make a time for, the curtain was, in those days, it was 8:40 instead of earlier. And I remember Mama was a series I was on. I played Ingeborg, for anyone who is alive and remembers that. And Peggy Wood was the star, Judson Lair, a lot of good old people, New York people. Anyway, so I played a character on that show, and the show went on at 8 o'clock live, and then the curtain was 8:40, and it ended at 8:30. And so they tried most of the time to keep me on the early side of the show, and but most of the time it was a rush job anyways to get to curtain. So my mom would be waiting with a cab, and my wardrobe for Rhoda, which was the bad seed, was in the cab. So I would, whip off in the back of the cab my clothes, which seems really peculiar. And cab driver must have thought, oh God, what's going on in the back. Today, people would be picketing, my mother and everyone. But it was very innocent, and it all worked out most of the time. And my poor understudy would be waiting, dressed in the backup clothes, and hoping to God, because kids don't really want to be the one, when you haven't had the opportunity to rehearse enough and all that. So she was always so relieved to see me. So anyway, I have so many little bad seed memories. I'm way back in time now, because that happens. I was always shy about singing a little, and I had to learn My Man in French. So I learned it. I had to learn a lot of things like that as a kid, but it was phonetically. So you just looked at it and it went in, and it stayed in. So it was a Playhouse 90, and it was Lee J. Cobb played my father. The scene was, he was playing the piano. It was a party scene, a lot of extras. I had to sit on the piano and sing the song, and I got it down, it was good. And then dress rehearsal, terrific. And then we went live, and still if I hear the theme from Playhouse 90, the hair on my arm goes up. Seriously. It is a wonderful theme song anyway, but when they piped it in, because they piped it into the studio, and so it was like you were at war, or something. And so for whatever reason, I got nervous. Maybe the singing, and there I was on the piano, and I started to sing, and I think I got off track because I was thinking of the second verse, because I still can remember the words now, I won't do it for you. And I started to sing, and suddenly they left me. And he knew it, I knew it, they all knew it. And the extras was so phenomenal. They picked up immediately and started doing da-da-da. They didn't know, the words, but they da-da-da-da-da. And that's how we got through. But it was, live. And so no one knew I was supposed to sing it in French. It is a feeling of out of control, where you feel like you know what you're doing. There's always that sense of control when it's going well, and you trust yourself and whatever. And so I think I experienced what it's like to have no trust in my own ability, and that was horrifying. That's what I would say. Wow. That's pretty scary.
Thanks so much for tuning into The Actor's Nightmare. We hope you enjoy listening to the podcast as much as we do producing it. And remember to subscribe to the Actor's Nightmare podcast. You can go to our website at www